Thank you, Corinne. On behalf of the family of Noah Linn Hendershot, I welcome you to this service of witness to the resurrection, and thank you for your supportive presence here today. In addition to the two announcements you find printed at the bottom of the second page of your worship bulletin, I want to call to your attention that early in our service we will take time to reflect on the remarkable life and contribution of our friend Linn Hendershot. 4 individuals listed in the bulletin will share, and then we will provide opportunity for others to speak. We want you to know that now, to give you a chance to think about whether you might want to offer a word at that time. We will ask you to come and use the microphone for that purpose. We have come upon a recording of a song, Lucky Old Son, that Linn did when he was a junior in high school. And the individual who accompanied him on the piano, Carol Martin Kummerer, is also here today, but we're going to play that recording for us. And I think you'll see how very appropriate this song is to this day.
Nothing to do but roll around heaven all day. Fuss with my woman, toil for my kids, sweat till I'm wrinkled and gray, while that lucky old son has nothing to do but roll around heaven all day. Good Lord above, can't you know I'm pining? Tears all in my eyes. Send down that cloud with the silver lining. Lift me to paradise. Show me that river, take me across, and wash all my troubles away, while that lucky old sun gives me nothing to do but roll around heaven all day.
Thank you, Brian. Well, you understand why we did that early in the service. We couldn't handle it any later in the service, but how appropriate and how helpful to hear that. Please join me now in our call to worship that is printed on the first page of your worship bulletin. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Jesus said, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. I was dead, and behold, I am alive forever and ever, and I have the keys of death and Hades. Because I live, you also will live. We believe in Jesus died and rose again, so we believe in those who have died in Christ. God will raise them up to be with the Lord forever. We'll join in singing His Eye is on the Sparrow at this time. That is on, the lyrics are on the page. Let us pray. Eternal God, we bless you for the great company of all those who have kept the faith, finished their race, and who now rest from their labor. We praise you for those dear to us whom we name in our hearts before you. Especially we thank you for Linn, whom you have now received into your presence. Help us to believe where we have not yet seen, trusting you to lead us through our years. Bring us at last with all your saints into the joy of your eternal home, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Let us now ask God to cleanse our hearts, to redeem our memories, and to renew our confidence in the goodness of God. We join in our unison confession of sin. Let us pray. Holy God, you see us as we are and know our inmost thoughts. We confess that we are unworthy of your gracious care. We forget that all life comes from you and that to you all life returns. We have not always sought or done your will. We have not lived as your grateful children, nor loved as Christ loved us. Lord, in your mercy, forgive us and make us whole. Set us free from our sin and restore to us the joy of your salvation, now and forever. Amen. Friends, the mercy of the Lord is from everlasting to everlasting. I declare to us in the name of Jesus Christ that we are forgiven. May the God of mercy, who forgives us all our sins, strengthen us in all goodness, and by the power of the Holy Spirit, keep us in eternal life. Amen. We gather together to celebrate a life, to affirm our hope of resurrection, and to comfort one another in this time of loss. And so we will now celebrate together the life of Noah Linn Hendershot. And I'll invite those who are listed in the bulletin to come one at a time. Use the microphone, please, and share what is on your hearts. And then at the conclusion of these four individuals, we will open it up to others who may want to come and share at that time.
Wow. You know, everybody's waiting for what a ride. But, wow, it's really amazing when you put wheels under a guy, you give him an apparatus to breathe. How many people he touches? Linn taught me a long time ago, and I think a lot of you know him from 12 years ago. I knew Linn for 56 years, and he taught me some really important things. One is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. He taught us a lot about success, and I found something that I believe very much just indicates how successful Linn was in his life. What he said was success is knowing your purpose in life, growing to reach your own maximum potential, and sowing seeds that benefit others. I would have to say that Linn Hendershot certainly fulfilled that definition of success. I'd like to talk to you a little bit this morning, not about the Linn Hendershot that a lot of us knew the last 12 years, but is Linn Hendershot that was a big brother. I lost a brother, a friend, and the best batting practice pitcher a 4-year-old could ever ask for. At 8, he stopped being a batting practice pitcher because I was getting bigger, and I hit a line drive right back at him and darn near killed him. So he decided that would be the day that he would become a batting practice instructor. And I think, as for those that know him, he's been instructing ever since. Read a lot about Linn in the papers. The Herald's been very, very kind to him. There have been times it's been colorful, and it's always been exciting. But I found something. This is a little yellow. This was done 43 years ago by a gentleman named Joe Snyder. Some of you may remember Joe. And he was talking about a 20-year-old college student that was making a difference at the University of Maryland. And it starts with Linn Hendershot as a 20-year-old college student who, by his own admission, lives and dies with the University of Maryland athletic teams. He has developed an unwavering loyalty to all of them and has been known to root just as enthusiastically at the sparsely attended swim meets as at the football games surrounded by 30,000 people. It is safe to assume that Linn would cherish the opportunity to be out there and play himself, but this unfortunately is not in the cards. And it talks a little bit about the bump in the road that a lot of us, he called polio. But he really is a Terps fan, always will be. He became sports information, or student sports information director. And he goes on in accolades about things like the things that he did, his boss, how much he really appreciated everything. But what really hit me here was he talked about two things, and he did the football games, did the basketball games too. And one of the comments, or one of the paragraphs here, it said, when football gear had been packed and mothballs and basketball became king, Bill Dismer, who was a sports information director, decided to try something new at Cole Fieldhouse. He wanted to supply a typewritten play-by-play for the writers covering the game. And he needed a typist, a fast one, too. Guess what Linn said? I'd like to take a crack at it. Linn told his boss, and presto, Linn had another assignment. For anyone who ever kept a basketball play-by-play, Dismer said, there may be no concept of the concentration, the speed, and typing skills demanded, especially during high-scoring games, but Linn never missed a basket, the maker, the type of shot, and the time it was scored. Dismer took pains to mention also that Hendershot this year compiled the Maryland's first baseball and swimming brochures, handbooks prepared before the season to distribute to the media. And they contained a raft of statistical data, which took both long hours to assemble. We all know that Linn had no problem working long hours. His boss's comment was both of these books could be considered models for any college publicist in the country. Linn did an excellent job at something he had never attempted before. So that I'll tell you one thing about that boy. He may not be able to keep up with you when he's walking on those crutches. But watch out when he's racing around Cole Fieldhouse in that wheelchair. Linn was a wonderful coach, and I made that comment to a number of people, and I said a wonderful Little League baseball coach, because he was. And the reply was, well, he didn't just coach Little League baseball. I met one of his college roommates just a few minutes ago, and the comment was made, he taught me how to study, kept me in school. I met somebody who got a baseball scholarship at the University of Maryland, and the coach had never seen him play. Did it with Lynn's recommendation. Very proud of our brother. I look at my sister and I recognize just how blessed I was as the baby. Everybody talks about, you hear about sibling rivalry. There was never any sibling rivalry in our house. It was always sibling support. We're going to miss Linn. But his legacy moves on. A lot of you saw the list, his to-do list that's out in the foyer. And I've never seen him do a list so neatly. And I'm wondering if he didn't have an idea of what was coming. And beside that list there were little blocks. And I've heard suggestions that that was probably for check marks. I'm suggesting that it might be for initials as to who's going to fulfill that list. We love them. We'll miss them. And the one thing, when we hear that lucky old son and we think about Linn, always he would talk about taking lemons and turning it into lemonade. And I'm sure a lot of you have also heard that one of the things that he didn't do over the last 12 years is he didn't buy any green bananas, because his idea of long-term planning was if it was Monday, Friday was good. But Linn, green bananas are now in Linn's life. I thank everybody for being here. I thank everybody for celebrating Linn's life. You've heard from his little brother. And now I'd like you to hear from his daughter.
Let's see if I can get through this. First of all, it is amazing to me, the people that have showed up. As you all probably know, I don't live here. I'm 800 miles away in Alabama. So for me and we came up, me and my 3 kids, as much as we could, but I guess I just didn't realize how much I knew. Of course, Dad's a wonderful person. We all knew that. But to see what all he's done and all the people that he's touched and done for is just, it's mind-blowing. I am real proud of my dad. Because of him, there was a lot of things that I got to do as a child that a lot of the other kids were a lot jealous of, and I did brag about it. But there were people that I got to meet, famous people, just really neat things that I got to do. I'm going to miss him. I kind of wish that I had spent more time with him. He loved these kids of mine. And he was real proud of them. Every one of them. I think I put both my mom and my dad through some hard times like kids do, and I know they do put you through hard times, and they make you crazy sometimes, and I know I did that. And I think, it just happens, but I think he was proud of me. I tried to make him proud. And he was one thing that I do wish that he could have been around for, but my oldest son, Ben, graduates on the 23rd of this month from high school. And he wanted to be there. He was real excited about it. Even though he had been sick, and Ben was excited too. But he was so proud of him. He's actually got a plan. He's going to school. He's going to get a degree. And my other 2 will too. But he was real proud. And I don't think he realizes how proud he was, but he was. So I loved him a lot, and it's going to be hard. But I know he's up there, and he'll be watching over us, and that gives me comfort to know that. So.
Thank you, Pam. Terry, if you would come now. Thank you.
I was talking to Tom this weekend about the arrangements for this service, and what Tom said to me If Linn could be here, he would be organizing this service. There's no doubt about that in my mind, how true that would be, really. Also, I want to make sure that everyone has their cell phones off, because if Linn also could, he would be making a telephone call. That's the way he was. I know if I would find a message there, it would probably be from Linn. Linn was on the board of directors of CRS, and CRS is so well represented here. We have the first two pews up here, and we're going to be part of the honor guard, and we're going to be at the funeral. And he was an organizer with CRS that had that sense of urgency. He needed to get things done, and he wanted to get things done as soon as possible. But really what put it in sort of perspective to me is knowing how Linn was so dedicated to CRS, Community Rescue Services. When I went over there and I looked at this to-do list, and if you haven't seen it, and what Tom was talking about, had 2 full pages of to-do. And I looked on there and I read on this and I said, CRS, we're not on there. I said, he had such an involvement, such an astounding community involvement with other people in here, that I knew the dedication he did with CRS, but I didn't know everything about these other ones. So I'm sure everyone here is really touched by that to-do list if you happen to see it. So what I really admired about Linn was his concern for the welfare of other people. He was always talking about how he could help. He wanted to make a difference in other people's lives. He cared about other people. And that's what I admired him as more than just anything else, the care that he had, always. What can we do? What can we do? How can we help other people? Never heard Linn complain about his handicap. Never. I just really knew him through the past 5 years. He did say to me, though, he would not know what to do without his sister Miriam. So he really depended upon her in so much. An example about how he cared for other people is really he offered himself for our CRS paramedics over here to use him to help train in the airway management. The CRS paramedics over here don't get, that much of a chance to do that. So Linn says, if you need to, to use me to work with it, I would be willing to do this. At a recent board meeting at CRS, we were talking about purchasing new devices that could save lives in other critical situations. This device is called an Easy-IO. What it does, it allows a paramedic to inject life-saving fluids directly into a patient's bone when the paramedics cannot find a vein for an IV. With CRS, we purchased a few of these, but we didn't purchase enough for all the ambulances. Linn heard about this, and Linn wanted to get that sense of urgency. He wanted to get out there. How can we get more? How can we get more? We want one for at least one ambulance. So Linn was very instrumental in helping us put together some grants that we have due that haven't really come back, but they're in the process right now of getting this. We've had these devices for about a month, but we had not used them until CRS got a 911 call to help Linn. This was the first time that we used this IO, and we were able to bring Linn back with a pulse so that when he got to the emergency room, he had that pulse. If you didn't know, Linn was an organ donor. Perhaps the use of this device that we had, along with a lot of other things, Linn was available for all he wanted to. He was made available. It was able to sustain his life in the hospital. At the hospital, a procedure was done on Linn's organs. Linn has made a difference. He's made a difference in at least 7 other lives. He was able to have the procedure where his organs would be transplanted to others that would need. I feel Linn is in heaven, perhaps walking, jumping around, screaming maybe by himself for the first time in his life. I'm sure everyone else feels that way. As Lynn said, and as Tom says, wow, what a ride. Lynn, we will miss you.
Thank you, Terry.
I came back to Hagerstown in 1997 expecting to die. I don't worry about extended warranties. I only buy ripe bananas. You got that one before I got it. I want to tell you, though, with all the time I spent with Linn, I never saw him eat a banana. You ever see him eat a banana? But he loved that line, so I had to, for both of us, have used that line. When I was trying to figure out what I would say today, I didn't want to write a speech, so I started writing down some words that I thought typified Linn. Creative, smart, funny, loquacious. I thought, no, wait a minute, should I say talkative? No, Linn would really like loquacious, and I said to myself, gee, I can have a lot of fun with that word. A couple of weeks ago in the hospital, I was visiting with Linn and talking with him, and a nurse came in and said, Linn, we're going to do a test. You have to be quiet for 5 minutes. And I said to the nurse, he can't do that. He can't be quiet for 5 minutes, but he did. I think it's the only time I met with Linn wherever, when I did the talking, but somehow he was able to keep quiet for 5 minutes, and the test was successful. When I started spending time with Linn, he was on his working on setting up the computer recycling. And we would drive down to Jessup, Maryland to pick up computers. And we'd come back with his van full of maybe 15, 16 computers, which he would give to people in the community. And I would drive the van, and he would sit behind me and talk. And I learned all about Linn Hendershot. I met Pam through that. I met the kids. He was very proud of you kids, very proud of his grandchildren. Of course, I knew Marion, Super Sister Marion, who, between Marion and the Western Maryland Hospital Center, were able to keep Linn going for all these 11, 12 years. I was also introduced to little brother Tommy, the athlete. Basketball, baseball. Tommy, I want to know whether you really did hit the ball that far. According to Linn, that ball is still going and will be going forever. And we're driving, and I'm driving, and he's behind me, and it's a day that's, I think we're on Route 32 going down to Jessup, and it's an overcast day. Maybe it's been raining, and my role is to keep the van on the road, and he's talking. All of a sudden, there was silence. I didn't think much about it. This was early on in my relationship with Linn, and I didn't think much of the silence. It turns out later that his hose had come undone. And those that spent time with Linn know how often that happened. And sort of unsettling when I think back after I'm driving and he's struggling to get there. I used to say to him, Linn, it's really recommended that you keep breathing. Some other words for Linn. Last minute. I did a lot of projects with Linn, and I'm not last minute. But Linn was last minute. Somehow we got through it. Obstinate. Obstinate? Yeah. Involved. I wrote down some of the projects that Linn and I worked on, or Linn worked on. Project Lifesaver is one that's going on right now. We had a meeting on that yesterday. That will be a legacy of Linn's that will carry on. Universal design housing. My High with St. John's Episcopal Church built a universal design house for a gal by the name of Shannon Moniger who has spina bifida. That was really quite an effort. If you know what universal design housing is, that's good. If you don't know what universal design housing is, it means we still have some work to do. The Boundless Playground. Those of you that saw the tribute to Linn on NBC last Friday and have watched the video that was here yesterday saw the ribbon cutting at the Boundless Playground, which is out at Marty Smook Park. That's the standard for playgrounds for kids. That it was only there because of Linn Hendershot. When that came up initially, I said, Linn, no, we'll never get a state grant for that. You know, we're just beating our heads against the wall. No, but it's there. That's the standard for what playgrounds should be, where kids of all abilities, the word inclusive comes. Kids of all abilities can play together. And that's there strictly because of the efforts of Linn Hendershot. The fishing frenzy at Pangbourne Park, this year it'll happen on June the 14th. That started because of Linn. Linn was on the city council that he works with. That's now being done with the city of Hagerstown. Fishing in Pangbourne, if you know Pangbourne Pond there, it's not very big. Linn would get that stocked every year. And the people that could fish were children, people with disabilities, and seniors. Children, people with disabilities, and seniors. Now, doesn't that sound like Linn Hendershot? I talked about the computer effort that he's done. The last word that I came up here was helpful. Linn was always very helpful to me. I worked with him specifically with things in my high, but if I had a need for some help with a project that didn't involve that, he was always very helpful to me. Many people heard him say that the most important phrase is, I need you. Not I love you, but I need you. And he used that so often that if I were in the room, he would say, as Bill has heard me say many times, the most important phrase is, I need you. Well, we all needed Linn Hendershot.
Thank you, Bill. I know that Herb wants to say a word. I'm going to invite him to do that at this time. And then if there are others of you who would like to offer a word today, please start to make your way maybe to the entrance here of the chapel. So come ahead, Herb, please.
Good morning. I'm Herb Harden. I'm Linn Hendershot's brother-in-law, Marion's husband. And I appreciate it, Bill, that you and Terry said what you said about Marion. Sharon Washington. Who is she? Where is she? Well, Sharon's at a state political committee meeting the next 3 days. She's in Ocean City, Maryland. She's an African-American lady. She spent every morning, many afternoons, late evenings, for the last 10 years, taking care of Linn Hendershot. She calls Linn Bud. Linn calls her his best friend. You have to know the love that's in Linn and Sharon when they get together. Their humor, their relationship has love. So much that Sharon came in the other night in the hospital and promptly approached Pam and said to her very kindly, I'm Lynn's other daughter. And we enjoyed that very much, knowing the love that he has for both. You see the deep respect and the concern each of these people had when they got together. Linn did help get this position for Sharon on this committee at the state level. You know, this was another one of the many special projects Linn had. And Bill, you and Terry know very well, he had a project at least every hour every day. Well, this was a project to get her on this committee, and it meant a great deal to him. She spent 3.5 hours with us the other night. And during that time, 3 times, she mentioned, please let the people know that my heart and mind is with Linn. So today, Sharon's in Ocean City because of Linn Hendershot. And Linn, he's where he belongs today. Both of them, for their honesty, their beliefs, their good works for others, yes, and the love for and with and of other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Herb. And I see some folks at the door. Just please come and share. And I'd ask you to begin by telling who you are and your relationship with Linn. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jen Kuhn. I'm one of the people my father shared a room out at Western Maryland with him. Okay? That's probably how I know him. Very well. There's really 2 things I'll remember about him so much. Even as a child, you know how children are. Things go in and out of their ears very fast. But the one thing he actually taught me was to appreciate the things that others can't do, but you can. He's probably the reason why I was able to take a job out at the village of Robinwood, because some of the people, they tend to be handicapped, but that's not the word for what Linn would say. He actually gave me appreciation for everything that those people in the wheelchairs couldn't do. He gave me appreciation, I guess, for life. And then the other one thing that I'll actually remember about him is my 8th birthday. My dad was still out at Western Maryland, so my mother and I had brought a birthday cake out and some ice cream. And you know Linn, zipping in and out of the room as fast as possible because he was always doing something. He stopped by one time and said, "That cake looks awfully good. May I have a piece?" So we let him have some, because heck, after even a couple of months of being out there, Linn was more like family than just a friend. And also, shortly after my father had died, he knew that my dad had wanted to know how I liked Orlando, because I was supposed to go out with the band. I had ran into Linn a couple weeks after Orlando, and he stopped me and asked me, something told me to ask you, how did you like Florida? Something told me, as if I had a dream about your dad, because I knew he wanted you to go. And I can honestly say that I think right then and there, he actually projected something I had missed for the 2 months that in between Orlando and my dad passing away, because Linn was always there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Then, whoever would like to come next?
My name is Darrell Lyles. I met Linn for the first time at Western Maryland Hospital Center. I went over there because I was a complete quad. And he, and this will go on with me forever, he never allowed me to say I can't. He said there's no such thing. And I live by that today. He said he told me the only thing that I couldn't do was everything that I said I couldn't. And that was it. My life, I grew up, I see Linn as a pillar in this community. You know, I was one of the problems. But he didn't look at that. It says at the bottom on the front page, assurance of forgiveness. Linn was one of those. Had a very, very forgiving heart. And some of my family weren't as forgiving as he is. Tom, you mentioned the list. I couldn't fill one of his shoes with both my feet. But I'm saying, put my name in one of those spots. And I challenge everyone else to do the same.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
My name is Randy Anderson. Lenny was my first roommate at college at the University of Maryland. And when I went down there, I was as green as grass. I was scared, homesick, you can imagine. Didn't know anybody. And when we went to the dorm, Miss Talbot Hall, my mother we found out that this guy I was rooming with was from Woffordesburg, Pennsylvania. And she said, "Oh, that's great. How fortunate, because now you can ride home with each other and all that sort of thing." And I didn't know what to expect. Everybody talked about him there in the dorm, and I hadn't met him yet. And that evening, all of a sudden, I heard this clanking of these metal crutches, and the door flew open, and he came in and greeted me, and I thought, "Oh my goodness. Who is this guy? I'm going to have to nursemaid this guy for my time in college, and I'm just new here, and I don't know anything, and I can't, Well, I soon found out that who was handicapped, and it wasn't him, let me tell you. I got to know him that he was part of this sports information department, and it was like a constant stream of these guys that would come in, these great big football players, and all these athletes would come in there, and they'd be crying, some of them, they'd be homesick, they had all kinds of problems with their girlfriends, they had problems with the academics, they had problems with school, and Mr. Dismer and all the coaches, and Linn would counsel them, he would soothe them, he would make them feel good, and they would talk all evening. I couldn't stay half the time because I couldn't get any studying done. They'd be talking all the time. But Lenny, he'd been out all day. He'd be worn out because he had to fight parking problems with his car, and at that time, there was no provision made for the handicapped anywhere. And he had to fight the university for parking privileges and so on, and he'd be worn out. And he'd spend all evening counseling with these guys and helping them out. And I know he counseled me too, because I was a freshman, started running around with other freshmen, and I was going to get in trouble and flunk out. And he counseled me into staying and tying down and doing what I should do. So I can thank him for me staying in college and, of course, the rest of my life. And these other people can be very thankful to an awful lot of athletes that come out of the university at that time that can be thankful for Lenny and what he did. And by the way, Tommy, I still have a lot of those play-by-plays he did at the basketball games. And he was definitely a dynamo of energy. You couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. I was so amazed that anybody like that could be so good with everybody and could care about these guys, and they loved him and he loved them. It was quite obvious. My mother said that I was so fortunate to have had this guy from Walkersburg to be my roommate. She really didn't know how fortunate I was. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Lynn's nephew, Brian, and Marion's son. Linn lived his life Christ-like. He did things to inspire people, and the whole point of this is about inspiration. Linn didn't do this for ego. He didn't do his task for glory or being on the front page, although that's what happened. He did it to inspire people. And he moved to this town about 12 years ago, and he really came here to die. He was in the greatest hospital in Atlanta, and they were sure that they were the greatest hospital, and he had a mass of doctors. And he moved here to the little tiny hospital over here, Western Maryland, and we were all sure it was pretty much the end for him. And little did we know it was the beginning. He called it his extra innings. His extra innings, that he had a whole new lease on life. He was stuck in this little hospital, but the first thing they did was got him so he could talk. He was in this great hospital, and they wouldn't let him talk. They wouldn't tighten his cuff. As soon as he talked, we were in trouble. And the second thing they did was get rid of all his anxiety. He was fearful. They didn't teach him how to use the ventilator and so on. So they got rid of his anxiety and his fear. And once the fear was released, and that fear within all of us happens every day, but once his fear was released, he was unleashed as a man. Again, back to normal. So he could really get something done. So he could talk, he had his fear released. And the community that was around him at that hospital, of those doctors and nurses and caregivers, were so powerful, way more powerful than the greatest hospital in Atlanta. Because the greatest hospital in Atlanta, there were just egos flying through. But in this small community, it was the same doctors every day, same nurses every day, and they cared. They cared for him in a way that he didn't get in Atlanta. And that lit something in him, sparked him up. And he wanted to give back to first of all, the hospital. And the hospital became his initial purpose. And then that spread out into the community, to everybody else. So his real thing, his real purpose was inspiration, to inspire you to do the same. So that comes from being unconditionally in love with everybody and everything. He didn't judge. He just did, because he knew everybody needed some help. It didn't matter what. So his unconditional love. And then the second thing was joy. He was full of joy, always trying to laugh, always trying to make jokes, make light of what it was, because he didn't take himself or anything else too seriously, but he knew it needed to be done. And he knew it could be done best by a community. And so the community here was enormously different than the community he had in Atlanta. This community came together around him and gave him jobs and tasks and connections that were harder in the big city of Atlanta. And so it's the inspiration. I want you to know that that's what he wants you to take. Inspiration. If you can help someone, if you can do something for someone, if you can follow through in his footsteps, even a little bit, do it. So look around you and see what you can do to help. Because that's how he spent his life. So, thanks.
a member of the proud class of
1962.
Okay.
We've heard a lot about Linn in the last 12 years and a lot of the things he's done, but I'd like to introduce you to the Linn Hendershot of the 50s and early 60s. When we were in school, I don't even know if the word handicapped had been invented yet, but we didn't think of Linn as handicapped, and he didn't either. So it was just Linn and the class of 1962, and we had a 2-story high school without an elevator. Well, to us, the only difference with Linn was he couldn't walk. That was it, nothing else. And I see one of the classmates that helped carry Linn or his books or his crutches or whatever is here today. And there were about 4 other guys that they just did it. They didn't do it because they had to. They didn't do it because it was expected of them. They did it because they loved Lenny. He was their brother. He was their friend. If we went on a class trip to Washington or an amusement park, nobody said, "Oh my, is Linn going to be able to go?" Linn went. We took a wheelchair. The boys pushed him. He enjoyed it as much as the rest of us, probably more. But there was never a time when we thought of Linn as being handicapped. He was just Linn. Couldn't walk, but he was at every basketball game because Mr. Harden was the coach and he was our phys ed teacher, and Linn was not really the water boy, the manager, whatever, but he was at every game cheering the boys on. He was just there. And that's the Linn Hendershot that I remember. I'm very proud of all the wonderful things he's done for the handicapped, but he wasn't handicapped. And he was one of my very first friends in the world. There's a group of us that went to Sunday school together before we ever started school. Those are my closest friends and the people that I remember. And I want to remember Linn in the class of 1962. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol Jean. And then do we have anyone else that wants to come and share? Yes. Okay.
My name's Ron Keplinger, and I knew Linn from the hospital, Western Maryland Hospital Center. And this is yet something else he's able to get me to do that I'm not very comfortable doing. He was very good at that. And he used to ask me to do stuff. He would say I need you to do something. He would come to me and he'd say, "I hate to bother you." And I could never get through to him that it wasn't a bother, whatever he was asking me to do or how I could help in the smallest ways. When he found out that I was a University of Maryland grad, he was very excited about that. And when he found out I would work for the football team, the flood of stories that would come from him, I'm going to miss those a bunch because he had such a grasp of events that took place back then. He would ask me if I would know somebody, somebody's name well before my time, and I'd have to look at him and say, "No, don't think I know that name." But he would go on and tell a great story of this individual, some accomplishment, and I'm really going to miss that part. That he enjoyed his life from the stories that I hear. He really enjoyed everything he did, took it all in. And the way he got people to do things, Brian was talking about inspiration. It really was inspiring just to see the group of people that's here. That I want to echo the sentiment the previous gentleman had about the challenge. That when this happened, when I heard he had passed away, I had a sense of there was so much more to do. There were so many more things we were going to do that I knew he had to do, that he wanted to do. So I want to put that out there as a challenge to everyone to really look. I'm up here to kind of challenge myself to make sure I don't lose sight of helping out, to not be bothered, to try to challenge yourself to do something, to get those check marks initialed instead of checked, so that we actually can get that to-do list accomplished. I think that to-do list kept going, but as long as we can knock a bunch of it out, I think we'll be much better off. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ron.
His accomplishments and the challenges he had, I got to thinking, Lynn and I kind of started that together. We used to have a family reunion in the Hagerstown Park every year. And I don't remember how old we were, but we weren't in school yet, I know that. And every year, we used to chase the ducks, trying to catch these ducks over there at the family park. And Lynn would come up with these plans, on how we were going to catch these ducks. We never caught any, but just sitting there and listening, he probably started, because back then, he would come up with an idea and a plan on how we would try and catch these ducks. We'd have bread, we'd had food, we had everything. We never caught one, but he started planning a long time when he was very, very young. And that's how I'm going to remember Lenny Hendershot.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to offer a word? Yes.
My name is Dan Kearns from Hancock, Maryland, and I'm kind of nervous about this, but I see Randy back there, and he got up here and said something, so I'm that guy that Coach Jack Jackson never saw play baseball that got a scholarship because of Linn Hendershot. So really three things that I remember about Lenny, other than three instances that I would like to just tell you about a little bit. The first one was way back in Little League when Lynn wanted to play so bad. Every year at the annual Little League picnic, we would always get together and have a game. Well, there was old Lynn. He would take those bottom crutches off, or those braces that he had on his legs, and he'd get on his knees and his hands, and they'd throw the ball to him, and somehow he'd hit it, and somehow he'd get to first base, and I'm saying, golly, Ned. And he was dirt from head to toe. And, he was just one of the guys. There was no question about it. I do remember that about Lynn. And then a couple times on our baseball trips, I remember one time we were at Clemson, and this was at Little John Coliseum, the old Coliseum there at Clemson. And a lot of us baseball players, we got together and we said, Lynn, where are you sleeping? And of course, we were bunked. They had bunks for us. And we said, well, Lynn, you've never probably slept in an upper bunk. We'll just put you in the upper bunk. So that would be fun for you. He said, well, what about I do in case there's a fire? I said, oh, don't worry about that. We all told him, don't worry about that. Well, during the course of the night, some of us got together and we struck a few matches, and you know how the smoke would get up there. Well, Lordy be, we hollered fire. Lynn was jumping up, and I can still see him having that crutch, and I can't tell you what he said, Pastor. I can't tell you what he said. It wasn't good. And then one other time when we were going back to the University of Maryland, and everyone that's been up here and talked about Lynn, they're right. How he made it through, what he made it through, I'll never know. He tried to teach me how to go to class, and I wouldn't go to class. But for him to get to class and to be there on time, and what he did for the baseball team, he was not only the manager, he kept the stats, he did everything. But this one particular night that we had been home and I rode back with him, it just rained something fierce. And I was living at the golf course that time. I was at Ritchie Coliseum to begin with, was the old Coliseum there in Maryland. But Linn got somehow finagled me to get me into golf course, where there was only a couple guys. He said, "You'll do better in your studies if I get you over there." So, but anyway, he got me over there. Well, it was raining, and so we got out to unload our stuff, and he said, "Well, I'll let you off here." Well, he said, "I'll help you." I said, "No, I'll get it. It's raining too much." I said, "You'll get soaked. You'll catch a cold. You don't need to catch a cold." And he said, "I'll get out." Well, he got out, and they had just put a new walkway in, macadam. Well, his crutch got in the mud. Again, Pastor, I can't tell you what he called me. When I wanted to help him up, and said, "Linn," and he would not take any help. And I mean, we was there 15 minutes in the pouring rain, but surely enough, he made it up, and we got our stuff in. He got back in his car. He said, "You even have to help me clean my car out." I said, "Well, I don't think I want to, because I mean, it was nothing but mud." But the thing, again, that I remember most about Lenny, and that is that, I don't know whether you're familiar with the book, I Am Third, based on the Gale Sayers story. But I really believe that was long before that story came along. That's how Linn felt. Linn felt that the Lord was first and he was second and his friends were third. And I know, even though I didn't keep in contact with him much lately, I'm gonna miss Linn Hendershot, and I know that he's responsible for helping me as much as he did. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I don't see anybody else at the door to the chapel.